Welcome. I'm Rabbi Joshua Davidson, and on behalf of the Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center's director, Dr. Gadi Levy, and our partner tonight, Tablet Magazine, it is my privilege to welcome you to this important event. I also hope you'll join us Friday evening during our 6 p.m. Shabbat service for a related conversation with David Harris, former CEO of the American Jewish Committee. And if you wish to learn more about membership at Temple Emanu-El, please don't hesitate to give us a call. As we approach the start of a new Jewish year, we will long remember this past one as a year of two parallel crises, one precipitated by the other, but which took on a life of its own. The first, obviously, Hamas's barbaric assault on October 7th, resulting in the murder of 1,200 and the capture of 250. And the second, the rash of anti-Semitic hostility we witnessed from the moment Israel began even to contemplate its response. This evening's conversation will first explore how hatred of Israel and hatred of Jews are intertwined, how global responses to October 7 reflect a new strain of the oldest hate, the role played and profits reaped by Iran, Russia, radical Islamist groups, and even Turkey and China, and what's at stake for both Israel and for the world. And then we will discuss how anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are playing out on the college campus, with 3 university students who braved the chaotic anti-Israel protests. But before we turn to tonight's program, we remember the American tragedy to which October 7th has often been compared, our own country's encounter with deadly Islamist extremism. 23 years ago today, 3,000 people perished at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. They were heroes and fellow citizens, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, children and grandchildren. We will always remember them. Thousands more have since died as a result of illnesses linked to the World Trade Center attack. We will always remember them too. In their memory, if you're comfortable doing so, would you please rise as we recite the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. V'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dukudasha b'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Thank you. Please be seated. Now to introduce our guests. I am delighted to call on Dr. Masha Mimran, a psychoanalyst who reviews literature in the field for international journals. She has a doctorate from Princeton University in comparative literature, and she's a member and trustee of our congregation. Please welcome Dr. Masha Mimran.
Thank you, Rabbi Davidson. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight. I'm honored and grateful to see so many of you here in person and online as we continue exploring these difficult times in Israel, all across the Middle East, in Ukraine, and here at home, in a thoughtful and warm community that help us make sense of the chaos in today's world. Tonight, we welcome a very special guest to help us sort through one of the most chilling current realities facing us, the world's condemnation of Israel. On October 8th, the intrepid French intellectual Bernard-Henri Lévy, who has spent years reporting on wars and issuing passionate warnings of the dangers of totalitarianism and fascism, flew to Israel to report on Hamas massacre, to bear witness to the unprecedented pogroms, and stand in solidarity with his Jewish people. When he returned home, he was shocked, as we were, to hear protesters, the media, humanitarian organizations, and governments lash out at Israel, turning the victim into the victimizer. His new book, Israel Alone, Solitude d'Israël, his 48th, is his response to this unsettling reality that we all face now. He will first chat with Alana Newhouse, editor-in-chief of Tablet magazine, and then be joined by Yola Ashkenazi, who survived the chaos at Columbia University, Bella Ingber, who dealt with anti-Semitism at NYU, and Shabbos Kestenbaum, who coped with the stress and hate at Harvard, to discuss what this new generation faces and what must be done to combat this new anti-Semitism on college campuses. Before we begin our event tonight, I want to introduce Paul Lévy of the Lévy Forum for Open Discourse, who made this evening possible. Thank you, Paul, and welcome.
Hold on. Thank you all for coming. I know you haven't come to hear me, so I'll be brief. I have some comments in my brief comments about Monsieur Lévy, no relation, but I will say that I've had the special privilege of getting to know him a bit over the past 6 months, and his warmth and his humanity, aside from his intellect and his courage, are truly inspiring to me. When with him, one really feels like one is with a friend of many, many years. So I hope you will enjoy the evening, and in particular, what he has to say. I'd like to start by saying something that you all know, but just to set the table a little bit. Today's 9/11, so it's 23 years ago when the World Trade Towers fell. I had no idea at the time, nor did it come to mind, that there was any sort of an anti-Semitic connection to the event. It seemed to me it was what it appeared to be, an attack on America. We'd gone into the Middle East, and we were criticized and in fact attacked because we did that. But not long after that, the amount of anti-Semitism that arose was truly shocking. So I find there's a certain connection between that event and the commentators on that event, those who criticize the Jews or Mossad for the attacks on the World Trade Center, and of course what's happening today. As you may have heard, we have this forum down in Palm Beach, and it's gone well. We've had some wonderful speakers. This coming season, in January, a woman named Ruth Weiss, who has been a professor at Harvard of Judaic Studies and Hebrew and Yiddish for a very long time. She's quite special. She's going to come speak, and she talks about inversion and diversion. And we're living that right now, and it's an awful feeling. It's one that's frustrating and provokes a sense of enormous impotence, at least in me, because when bad people are called good and good people are called bad, one really loses one's sense of where one is in the world, up and down, good and bad. It's very confusing. But I think the only thing it really means is that we as individuals have to engage and we have to fight back, you know. And I think that's a very important thing. I want to read you something which is 2 seconds. At the end of World War I, William Butler Yeats wrote a poem called The Second Coming. And some of you may have read it, but there's a part in there that is just so relevant to today that I can't not mention it. It goes on, it says, "Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned." Key part. "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." That's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against people who are completely ignorant, and we're struggling. We're struggling to set the record right. We're struggling to cause truth to triumph over evil and truth to triumph over deception. So it is a really serious fight, I think, that we're in. In thinking about the few remarks I'm now going to make, I thought of this superb novel by a fellow named Mark Halperin, whom you may have heard of. The book is called A Soldier of the Great War. And it came to mind because we are all soldiers in the great war now underway against Jews in Israel and around the world. Whether in Israel itself or in New York City right now, we all have an opportunity to fight for Israel. None of us here will lift arms in defense of Israel, but each of us can and should confront forcefully the rampant lies and deceptions filling our airwaves and newspapers. Social proprieties too often stifle discussion. The natural reticence of the well-bred is often taken for agreement, its own form of complicity. This war, though, is different. Those of 1967 and 73 were short-lived, with rapid victories and unambiguous outcomes. Today, each of us must fight to remove the scales of blindness that people are laboring under. As you know, the battle is especially long. Existential challenges confront Israel on many fronts, not only from Hamas, but from within. And sadly enough, from college campuses around the world, those in America being prominent in their anti-Semitic fury. Too many student protesters are simply ignorant of the history of Israel in the 20th century to the present and ignore the barbaric actions of those they support. Their moral compasses are truly awry. We are in a sorry state, in my view. Consequently, I can think of no better person than Monsieur Bernard-Henri Lévy, learned, wise, and passionate as he is, to speak tonight with Elan of Tablet Magazine, Emily Hamilton, and Michael Polyakov, the head of ACTA. We had the idea, which I hope proves to be a good one, of buying thousands of copies of his book, Israel Alone, and distributing them to students on America's college campuses. And we've had a bunch of people step up, so I think we're probably going to be able to, number's not final, 6,000 to 10,000 books, which will hit the freshman dorms of America's colleges. Not all of them, obviously. But we hope to have an impact. We hope people will take the time to read this, and if they read it, certainly his passion will come across. But the information he conveys, I think, will be very, very persuasive. So let's hope for that. So with that, let me hand over the podium to Monsieur Lévy, and I hope you all enjoy the event. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. So my friend Bernard is a French philosopher. He is the author of 48 books. He's the director of 8 films. He's one of the West's foremost intellectuals. Somehow, in his case, fighting for democracy and humanism against totalitarianism has also turned him into something of a celebrity. But there are other words that I could use to describe Bernard. And one of them is that he is a reporter, which that was a word that used to be a compliment and still is when I use it. The Soviet Union, the war in Bosnia, Iraqi Kurdistan besieged by ISIS, Afghanistan, Somalia, Bangladesh, Nigeria, and Ukraine. For as long as I have been following global politics, Bernard has been running toward injustice with the eye of exposing it. He puts himself physically on battlefields because we can't or won't, and he wants our ideas about the world to be rooted in reality. I bring up this personal history, the globe watching and globe trotting for decades, because it's important to understand what Bernard saw and understood before October 7th, 2023. He's written a book, Israel Alone, that challenges us to face head-on what is going terribly wrong in the world, but that also very practically helps us figure out how to fight it. Bernard very likely has seen more bloodshed, more corruption, and more evil than everyone in this room combined. And yet he sits here as one of the most activated and hope-driven people that I know. We all need to understand why that is, which is what we're here to do tonight. So, Bernard, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to begin on October 7th. I want you to tell us, in some way you were seeing what we were seeing, but in another way, there was a global chessboard that you saw moving in a direction that maybe many of us didn't perceive. You somehow got yourself to Israel incredibly quickly. I believe you were there by October 8th. What I was hoping you would do is tell us what you understood in that moment that maybe we didn't, and how you got yourself there that fast and why.
Thank you, Alana. Yeah.
You're good. I think it should work.
Hello? Oh, yes.
He's also tech support this evening.
No, it is true that on October 7 in the morning, I immediately felt that there was no other place in the world where I should be than in Israel. To be honest, I had this reaction already many times in my life. I think that there is no war to which Israel was compelled where I did not have the same feeling. The 2 previous wars in Gaza, the 2 wars in Lebanon, and the first war on my living time in 1967, I had the same feeling. I was 18 or 19 years old. The war outburst, and again, at that time, 57 years ago, my first reflex was to be there in solidarity with the people of Israel. So I did that all my life. But October 7, there was a difference. I understood, I think I was not the only one. I understood that an event with capital E was happening. I understood that something was happening which was absolutely unprecedented in the history of Israel and in the history of democratic nations, at least recently. I had the same feeling that I had 23 years ago when I first saw on my television the images of September 11. An unprecedented event, number one. Number two, I understood that this unprecedented event was also unpredictable. Like in economy, the black swan. You have some events which occur and which nobody did foresee and which were not foreseeable, impossible to see in advance. And I had the feeling, all that was in a few minutes. I had also the feeling that our future will be remolded by this event, that we were entering, we, the Jews, we, Israel, and we, the free world, and we, the world, in a new area, and also that maybe our past had to be rewritten in a way, that a lot of things which we thought we understood, maybe we misunderstood them. So, having all that in mind, I did all that I could. I called every possible airplane company, public, private, normal lines, charters, whatever, and I managed to be on the ground on the 8th of October, first in Sderot, and very soon, 2 days after, I tell that in the beginning of the book, in Kfar Aza, one of the martyrized kibbutzim, where I was horrified and in a way not unhappy to be among the first to enter. A few Israeli televisions too were there a few hours before, but I was there very soon. The fights were still going on in Kfar Aza. Terrorists, jihadists, killers, butchers were still on the ground. And I was not unhappy to be there at this moment. And I made this day, 10 of October, maybe 11, 10 or 11, I made the promise, I made the oath to myself, to the survivors of the massacre of Kfar Aza and of Be'eri, when I was the same day. I made the oath and the promise to some hostages' families with whom I spent some of the most terrible evenings and days of my life just after to write this book. This book for me was a duty, an obligation, in a way, an old rendezvous which every Jewish writer has with himself, but also a promise which I gave to those brave Israelis with whom I shared these terrible moments.
If I had to ask you to describe the fight that you believe Israel is in right now, and more broadly that you believe the free world is in, how would you articulate the fight that you see? What did you see happen that made that event an event with a capital E that drew a line in the sand?
Many things. First of all, what a philosopher, which I am also, and maybe foremost, before everything, before being a reporter, I'm a philosopher, would call the appearance, the outburst of radical evil. Radical evil means what? It means evil without any other purpose than itself. You can commit evil for I don't know, winning a territory, having a victory. There are many reasons to commit evil in all the wars of which human history is full. What we saw on October 7th was something completely different. The extent of the savagery, the cruelty of the murders, the women, as the New York Times reported very soon, raped and at the same moment cut into pieces by another man. The women raped while a second and a third man with a cutter did really lacerate their breasts and their faces. Honestly, there is no human, rational, political reason to act in such a way. And when you are in front of that, you are in front of what the theologians and the philosophers called the radical evil. I did not see that often. I went in many places. I went in Somalia. I went in Nigeria. I went in Afghanistan at the worst time of the Taliban and so on. This way of execute the evil, this way of butchering and killing ladies and boys, I'm not seen that often, and probably in Rwanda, maybe. But maybe not maybe even not. The way it was, okay, this is one thing. The other thing which happened during that day is something in a way bigger. I understood one tiny thing, which is that Hamas is not just Hamas. That Hamas is, you had an article in Tablet saying that a few days after, that Hamas was the little center of a huge empire composed by many forces, that it was just a tool, the marionette, as my friend Tom Kaplan would say, one of the tentacles of a big octopus, which was Iran, but also Russia, but also Muslim Brotherhood in general, therefore Erdogan. In the days that followed, we heard Erdogan, neo-Ottoman Turkey, claiming support for those executioners, calling them a resistance, refusing to condemn the barbarity. We knew very soon, in the following days, that all this was planned, not only by Hamas, not only by Iranians, but also in some meetings in Beirut, in some meetings in Tehran, and in at least 2 meetings, which I document in my book, in Moscow, by a wide range of powers, of which the Hamas was just the hand. So I understood that something at the dimension of the world was happening. And that on one side, we had Israel alone, and this, it will be proved very soon. And on the other side, we had the Hamas very surrounded. Solitude of Israel and centrality of Hamas. This deployed, created a new map of the big game of the world, which, on my opinion, relaunched the game in a different way. And I tried to think that through, and this is the other purpose of this book.
Now, bring this to our shores, because that global chessboard where all the figures started to move around, you have Turkey, China, Russia, Iran, and radical Islam all shifting. You also had a tsunami of an effect in the West, particularly of concern, I imagine, to our audience tonight here. It felt to some as though overnight many of our institutions became like tinderboxes, and the fires of anti-Jewish hate just spread right through them. And I'm talking obviously first and foremost, and most high-profile example of it is the elite university campuses. But not only. There are also cultural institutions, museums, literary magazines and outfits, feminist spaces, major authors and artists and filmmakers. It felt like almost in tandem, there was a shift. What happened?
What happened is, I will describe it in 3 steps, 3 remarks. First of all, I think that the hate of the Jews is a very, very long story, to be honest, since the Sinai, since the minute when a few tribes accepted a word which the other people refused, something started which you can call the oldest of the hatred. Number 1. Number 2, this hate against the Jews, which will never disappear, which has very deep roots, the only way to contain it, there is one way to contain this hate. It is strength. All sorts of strength. Spiritual strength, moral strength, the strength of the force of humanism, the strength of intelligence, the strength of the sort of intelligence which you find in the Jewish novels and in the Talmud, whatever. And of course, the military strength also, which is one part of this Jewish force that from time to time holds in respect, keeps at large the hate. And this worked since World War II, since the birth of Israel, since the birth of, in America and in Europe, of new generations of Jews who refused to fall in the same trap as their fathers and who decided to assert their Jewish pride. We have lived 80 years of a sort of blessed parenthesis. The hate was held in respect. I don't know if the word means in English. The hate was contained by the proud young Jewish students, by the proud Jewish writers in America and in France and in Europe who said we can be fully Americans and fully Jews, and so on. And by the existence, the brightness, the luminosity, and the invulnerability, the feeling of invulnerability of Israel. All of that created this containment. What happened in October 7 is that Israel, one of the biggest components of this strength, one of the pillars of that whole system proved to be weak. The sanctuary was invaded. The temple of the Jewish force there was an attempt to destroy it. And by the way, when I arrived in Israel on the October 8th, nobody knew if the invasion will really stop at Sderot or at Ashkelon. And the terrorists of the Hamas and their companions had the intention to go much further. So this feeling that there is no territory on earth where the Jews are really safe, this feeling that one of the main pillars of the temple was shaken and was wavering and could be destroyed, this broke the containment, and this gave to all the anti-Semites in the world a sort of permission, it was a go. And I listened in America, these great intellectuals, these great teachers, they are named in my book, I hope shamed and named, who a few days after October 7, they did not wait for any retaliation of Israel. It was when Israel was still under shock, was still not knowing how to react. And I listened to them. I saw the videos when they said that it was the brightest day of their life, that it was a day of pride, a day of joy. Professors in big universities, in the best league of American universities. This was the outburst of a contained hate that suddenly felt authorized to come back. And this phenomenon happened in American institutions, yes, from universities to Oscars to whatever. It happened in France, same. We had to face, and I had to face step by step, meter by meter in my country, this phenomenon, and this is exactly what happened. I believed, maybe you too, in a very naive way, I believe that this extent of evil, this radical evil, will provoke an evident feeling of world solidarity. I was sure of that. And there was that for a minute, for a few days, maybe a few hours. There was a sort of solidarity, an embracement, but it lasted so little. A few days after, from the top of the UN to the grassroots of the universities, we began to hear, sometimes smoothly, that of course, yes, but, yes, terrorism, but with some reasons. The context, the General Director of the UN, Antonio Guterres, yes, but there is a context, and so on. And at the end of the day, the explosion of joy of the most obscene of these intellectuals or deans of universities. So this is what happened.
So in addition to being a philosopher and a reporter and a writer and a filmmaker, I'm now going to ask you to be a shrink. You have argued that the only way to confront anti-Semitism is with strength. And with strength. And you've listed pillars of strength. But the problem is that we're finding ourselves in a moment when Jews are being victimized. And not only are they being victimized, but they're simultaneous to that victimization is the erasure at the same time of any of the crimes, which leads many of us to want to highlight the victimization, all of which makes it very, very hard to muster strength and muster hope. And I have felt in my conversations with people, particularly since the spring, a sense of not knowing how to manage what feels like two emotions in conflict. And so I was hoping that you might be able to psychoanalyze us all together as a group and tell us where to go from here.
You are right, Alana, but my personal conviction is that we have to do the two things at the same time. First of all, I hate to say that because I have not the temperament of a victim. But we have to say and repeat and show that we are victimized. I don't like it again. I'm a proud Jew. I never thought that I would beg for empathy or that I would beg for tears. But we have to. It has to be clear, it has to be repeated that the Jews, Israel, did not want this war. That if there is a genocidal intention in the area, it comes from those there and here who say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which means in clear that Israel has to be eradicated and that a few millions of Jews have to be thrown away or to be killed. So this is the first point. We have to make this statement very clear. We have to make it very clear. And again, I know we share that. I share it with my friend Tom Kaplan, that there is a world, in big parts of the world, there is the will to have Israel to disappear. It's a fact. The liberal Israel, the democratic Israel, the Israel extending, being the best multi-ethnic place which I ever saw, and so on, has to be eradicated. So this has to be made very clear. And we have to recuperate, we have to recover our strength. How? First of all, winning. Alas, this war, which Israel did not want, it has to be won. And there is no, as I said in another place, I love compromise, I love peace, but there is situations where compromise is not an option. The only option is to be a victor in this war. In order to avoid another October 7, which was and is the intention of the perpetrators, they said it very clearly. As Che Guevara said 50 years ago, 1, 2, 3, 1,000 Vietnam, they said 1, 2, 3, 1,000 October 7. But also to recover the capacity of deterrence against the other enemies. So we have to win. This is the first thing. But the strength is not only that. And military strength for a Jew is the lowest level of strength. The real strength is the strength of spirit, of intelligence, and so on. And for that, what we have to do, to reply to your question, is it's more complicated, but it is to rebuild or to build a real system of brotherhood and of alliance around us. We have to consolidate the bridges with our brothers in humanity, Christians, Muslims. We have to be aware, and this is very important, that in the Muslim world, we have some friends, we have some enlightened parts of this part of the world who are our natural allies. We have to reinforce our support, for example, to the Iranian women who shout for freedom, for liberty, and for women. We have to extend a brotherly hand to the women again in Afghanistan, which we dropped flat in a cowardly way 4 years ago, and who are again our sisters. We have, in other words, in one word, we have to remember that to be a Jew, to be a committed Jew, to be an affirmative Jew, means a way to act regarding in respect of the others, not only us. It is a relationship with the rest of the world. This is to be a Jew. Not only, it is of course a relationship with our community, but it is also a relationship with the rest of the world, and we have to make that very clear. And if we do the two things, then we will win the battle. The two things: victim, alas, but also implement our mission, which is the real meaning, by the way, of to be a chosen people, to be the secret treasure of the nations, which takes part of the redemption of the world. I really believe that about being a Jew.
Amen. So Bernard is a historical actor. He doesn't sit on the sidelines of world events. He certainly doesn't sit on the sidelines of events that come to his doorstep. There were a group of historical actors. There were a group of young people who we all watched this year face challenges that I think made them inspirations. I'm really, really lucky and proud to be able to welcome 3 of them to the stage tonight so that I can be here with 4 of my heroes. Yola Ashkenazi, Bella Ingber, and Shabbos Kesterbaum. Please come join us. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey. Your faces are familiar to a lot of people in this room, and I think many of them may have even heard you speak about the events of this past year. But what a lot of us don't know is actually how it all started for each of you. So just like I did with Bernard, where I asked him to take me back to the beginning of the story for him, I'd like you to, each one of you, we'll start with you, Bella, to take us back to the moment where you realized that this was actually, I'm not asking you, unless the moment of October 7th is when it happened, but I want to know when it felt like it was a war that you had to be a part of.
Sure. I think that it was immediately after. It was immediately after, on October 8th, when I turned my phone on, and I was greeted not by messages of sympathy and of people reaching out to check on me to make sure that my family, both here in the States and abroad in Israel, and my friends that were being called to the front lines were okay. But it was when I saw celebrations in the streets of New York City, in Times Square. And I call them celebrations because Israel had not retaliated yet. Israel was still being attacked. And these were people taking to the streets en masse, protesting. It was a celebration of Jewish death and of Jewish suffering. And I remember seeing that and thinking to myself, how unfortunately similar it was to the stories I grew up hearing about from my grandparents who survived the Holocaust and of their communities. And I was seeing that reflected, and I was seeing the silence from my peers, and it was very similar to that which my grandparents told me about. And I think that what's different about our experiences is that the Jewish community is different. We have a seat at the table now, and we have a voice that we didn't have before. And more importantly, we have the state of Israel, which we did not have before. And I think that that called me to action. I realized I needed to utilize the tools that I had at my disposal to not only defend my Jewish identity, but also to defend our Jewish home. So I think that it was that moment for me, for sure, that kind of sprung me into action.
Yola, amazing. So Yola, you were all the way uptown, and at my alma mater, I keep wondering what I should do with those diplomas, but anyway. Did it start for you right away, too?
It wasn't on October 7th, but it was October 12th. At the time, I had worked at a finance job in Midtown, and on October 12th, we were holding 22 minutes of silence right in front of the library, 1 second for each person murdered by Hamas on the 7th. And I arrived a bit late because finance. And from outside the gates, I wasn't hearing silence, but I was hearing cheers, and I was hearing chants. And I hadn't realized that there was going to be a counter-protest to our vigil. And that day, it was sort of accidentally. When we were wrapping up to go, I saw a reporter interviewing a lot of these anti-Israel students. And I'm very specific to call them anti-Israel because, again, on October 12th, Israel's counteroffensive has not really started yet. It's naive to call them pro-Palestinian. And I see this reporter interviewing all of these anti-Israel protesters, and then when he came over to our side, because there were a couple of anti-Semitic incidents that happened between the 7th and the 12th on our campus, no one really wanted to speak to this reporter, so he started walking away. And I don't know what it was in me, but I was like, this is wrong. This reporter only got one side of the story. And so I sort of ran after him, and I was like, hi, I see you didn't speak to any of my friends. I'm happy to answer a question or two if you'd like. And I think he asked me, what are you doing here today? And I gave him a 30-second sound bite. And I think that went on Snapchat Discover, like something random. But then apparently bookers on major news networks, that's their job, to look at these random things to find what they call talent. And they found me, and I got a call from Fox News, and I was like, what do I do with this? I don't know. I'm just a 21-year-old student, and I work in finance. Like, I don't know what I have to say. But my mom told me, well, it might be a good opportunity to use your voice, and you're going to want to look back at this time and feel proud of the way you acted, and be able to tell your kids, God willing, one day that you did something. And so I did it. And then I did it again because they liked me for some reason. And then after the second time, I woke up at like 4 a.m., like 2 days in a row. I was like, this is not for me. But something happened. I called out specific university administrators who hadn't answered my emails about a certain club barring Zionists on campus. And 15 minutes after it went live, I got a response from every single one of them. And so that's when I realized I have to keep using my voice.
Now, Shabbos, you're the quietest and the least known of everyone here.
And still single, so if you have Jewish... if you have any Jewish granddaughters, just find me after.
Man, he's here all week, ladies and gentlemen. Shabbos, talk to us a little bit about how this story started for you.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say that people often ask me, given the death threats I get, given the friends I've lost and the public scrutiny, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep speaking out? And I always say, because deep down in my heart of hearts, I think if I keep doing this, Temple Emanu-El will finally invite me as a speaker. So this is a true honor. The story did not begin after October 7th. In fact, it did not even begin on the night of October 7th. I had written an article for a Jewish publication, unfortunately it was not Tablet, titled Anti-Semitism at Harvard. I wrote it in October of 2022. this was happening for decades. For decades. I always joke that my life hasn't changed. I've always done what I do best, which is simply complaining. The only difference is now people are listening. There was pervasive and systemic anti-Semitism, not just at Harvard and not just at the Ivy Leagues, but across institutions of higher learning. The only difference is after October 7th, it really became undeniable and inescapable. So look, I can give you guys a laundry list of incidents that happened at Harvard alone, about a Jewish student who was spat on for wearing a kippah, physical assault at Harvard Business School, an Israeli student who was asked to leave the classroom because her nationality made others uncomfortable, or in my case, there was a staff member who had worked at Harvard for 26 years who vandalized all of our posters, writing that Jews did 9/11, and then challenged me to debate him in an underpass as to whether Jews, in fact, were behind 9/11, and then threatened me with a machete. This is happening at Harvard University. So there is pervasive and systemic anti-Semitism, but I just want to very quickly, and then I'll shut up, just very quickly, people often ask me what was it like post, but that is a tremendous disservice to what actually happened on the ground, and it excuses the inexcusable and despicable behavior of our ideological adversaries. So I'm an Orthodox Jew, meaning I don't use the phone or any electronics on the Sabbath. And for the first time in my life, I broke that. I was told by my rabbi to use my phone to contact my loved ones in Israel. And thank God they were okay, but that was not the case of many Harvard Jews on campus. As we're doing that, 34 student groups at Harvard University, representing more than 1,000 students, who saw the images of women bleeding from their private areas, of babies being abducted into Gaza, of burnt bodies. And their immediate reaction was, the future of America, their immediate reaction was to jump out of bed, some were still in their pajamas, to draft an emergency statement blaming Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. The statement literally began, "We hold the Israeli apartheid regime entirely responsible for all ongoing violence in the Middle East. No mention, let alone condemnation of Hamas." And then professors get on the bandwagon, of course, and here we are today. But after October 7th, I bought a one-way ticket to Israel. I say it's one-way because American Airlines canceled my return ticket, but one way is a lot more heroic. And I spent... and I spent the first 3 weeks of the war digging graves for soldiers who were killed in Gaza, delivering supplies to army bases, singing songs in the hospital for injured civilians, and they said, please, we've suffered enough because I don't have a very good voice. And I didn't want to go back to Harvard. I really did not. But the ethics of our fathers teaches us that when there is a place where there are no people, strive to be a man. And I've been striving for the last 10 months. I'm certainly not perfect, intelligent, or articulate, but I'm very honored to be in this room with people who really are intelligent and brave and articulate, who are amplifying the voices of so many students who've been ignored for so long.
Student activism is a really interesting topic that all four of you have in common. And I saw a tweet the other day that I wanted to read because it fascinated me. Somebody asked, quote, "Are there examples of an American student protest movement where we now think with the benefit of hindsight that the kids were on the wrong side of the issue? Every student movement I can think of was vindicated by history," unquote. This person may be unfamiliar with Maoism, but it gets at something, which is the assumption that we have, and that we've had since the 60s, that protest movements have justice on their side, which inevitably makes them not a mob, and inevitably takes away responsibility from them, and puts anybody who disagrees with them on the wrong side of justice. Bernard, some of your earliest thinking was around the agglomeration of power and the cloak of justice that people wear. And I wondered whether or not you could talk a little bit about how you saw that functioning and the landscape that these young people were functioning on.
Wait a minute. First of all, when I listen to Yola, Bella, and to you, and when I remember of my own youth, the movements for justice, the radical groups to which I belonged at that time, and so on. There is a huge difference. The radical movements, the students fighting for justice, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, in 1968, there was three main differences with what happens today. In the 60s, in these years to which the people of the woke movement and so on pretend to refer, they pretend to refer to that. At that time, there was never confusion between the victims and the executioners. The people at that time could be crazy. They could be excessive. Everything, of course. They could be stupid when they embraced Mao Zedong, of course. But they never mixed, they never confounded, they always knew to make a difference between the victims and the executioner. Number one. Number two, they had the sense of the core of liberalism, which is the sense of universal values. We could make a lot of mistakes, but at least we believed in the unity of human gender. At least we believed that what was true for men was true for women, women for men, Arab world for the Western, and so on. The very idea of, for example, cultural appropriation was unthinkable in my generation. You must know that a few years ago, I made a film, a documentary, about the wars going on in the world. I went for this film, I went in Somalia, I went in Afghanistan, I went in various places, and I went in Nigeria, where you have in Nigeria a terrorist group close to ISIS called Boko Haram, and killing Christians there, okay? And I filmed that. I was in contact with Boko Haram. I interviewed some victims, and I gave the floor of my film to those Nigerian victims. And my film, I never said that, was selected by the jury of a big festival in New York of films. And at the last minute, the film was taken out of the selection. Why? Because I was accused by one of the members of the group, accused of practicing cultural appropriation. It was not my role as a white man, and as a white man, and as a Jew, to speak for a Nigerian lady which had had her arm cut into pieces till here by the torturers of Boko Haram, which is Al-Qaeda or ISIS. So again, this was unthinkable in my generation. And last point, which is very important. The left of that time, there is one border they never crossed, which was terrorism and anti-Semitism. And I remember the most radical group of this epoch, which was called La Gauche in France, La Gauche prolétarienne, proletarian left. They were crazy, but happened Black September, the massacre of the Israeli athletes in the Olympic Stadium. And this was the very moment when this group decided to dissolve itself, to liquidate itself. Anti-Semitism was the absolute border that could not be crossed, and terrorism also. This is the difference with the crazy ladies and guys, pupils and teachers, which you have to confront in your different experiences. This is the difference.
So, yeah. When you hear Bernard describe the left and the kind of radical politics of the 60s, I assume that it feels like he's from Mars, like that it just seems like the opposite of the experiences that you had. But what I want to know and what I'm interested in is, some people say, and we've even in our conversation shaded into this, where there's a little bit of blaming of a younger generation. We're always on our phones, we don't care about things, we didn't know what we were dealing with, we're on TikTok all day. And I'm really allergic to that line of thinking. I think that none of this was the fault of your generation. It was entirely the fault of my generation and generations older than me, and who did not prepare you for the institutions that you were about to confront. What I want to know is whether or not you understand that to be the case, and whether or not, especially given your read of Bernard's book, you now can tell us, A, what you feel you were missing this past year, what you could have used, and B, what you think we need to build for people who are going to be on campuses now. All of you.
Yeah, I can sort of start. I think that I was speaking with Yola about this a lot, especially when everything was sort of unraveling on our university campuses and we were feeling extremely lost. It was because that what we were dealing with, I think, we had never experienced something of this magnitude before. It was unprecedented, entirely unprecedented. And I think that a lot of it also had been taught to us through stories. I personally have never lived through a time in which my Jewish identity was questioned. Not once. I grew up sheltered. I'm from Westchester. I went to Jewish day school and Jewish high school. I took a gap year in Israel. And that's not to say I didn't learn, what I would be facing on my university campus throughout all those years. And through stories from my grandparents and my parents sort of equipping me with the tools to be proud of my Jewish identity and of my Jewish heritage and history and of, a love for Israel, which I have and I've maintained. But we never had this event that, Bernard, you write about so beautifully in the book with a capital E, that sort of defines and shapes the future. Unravels your present, but defines and shapes your future. And I think that we just lived through our event. And I think I don't just speak for myself, but I think I speak for all of the people in my generation. Don't count us out, because I think that we've risen to the occasion, and I don't think that we're backing down now.
Absolutely.
I think that an unfortunate circumstance took place, but our Jewish identities were challenged and questioned. Our homeland, the security of our homeland, was threatened, and I think that we faltered at first for a second. We had 5 days, I think, of complete, I think we were just a little bit thrown, but we took it and we stood up and we brushed ourselves off and we said, we're not Jews with trembling knees, and I think we went forward, and I think that the only way forward now is, going to be strong, and I think I speak for all of us here.
Yeah, let me speak for everybody else. Count you out. You're it. You're the future. And we are all looking to you now to help us. So there's no counting you out at all.
Like you were just saying, I think I also took a little bit of that blame on at first because there were signs. Unlike Shabbos, I didn't see them. I thought to myself, oh, it's just a snarky comment by a sorority sister. It's a one-off. She didn't really mean it, I would think to myself. Or it's just Apartheid Week. Of course, Students for Justice in Palestine is tabling and giving out these flyers with horrible things about Israel and them that are completely untrue. It's once a year, it's fine. And I took on that blame at first. But like you, I got to thinking, and it doesn't make sense that like Bella, I went to Jewish day school, I went to Jewish high school, I grew up in a Jewish community, that we were so naive not to think about this. There are huge Jewish institutions whose job it is to think about the continuity of American Jewry, and yet no one warned me that I was about to go into a place riddled with anti-Semitism with, like Bernard, like you said in your book, professors like Professor Joseph Massad, naming him, who called Hamas's attacks, quote, awesome on October 7th. Nobody warned me. And how could it be that we have these huge, successful Jewish institutions that either they didn't see it coming, which is just a huge problem, or they saw it coming and didn't warn me, which is like, hello, why? And then the second thing is, even once I started this whole role in activism, or whatever we want to call it, I got a lot of messages of support, from hundreds of messages from people throughout the Jewish community in all different places of the world. But it's like theoretical support. Like, let me know if you need anything. But then it's like when Fox News calls me, who am I supposed to call up to be like, hey, is this a good idea? It was October 13th, and I had no clue who to pick up the phone and call. And there was no one. And then it wasn't really until over winter break, when everyone really got everything together, that in January I felt like there were institutions and there were people who I can lean on. But at first there was no structure in place for me to be like, hey, help me. Hey, someone just came up to me and screamed at me and said I'm a baby killer. What do I do? There wasn't that institution. And I think that's what we need to build.
Yep. Agreed. Thank you. Aside from getting you married, what do we all need to do?
Well, give me suggestions. That's what you need to do. Well, it's funny. First, I would say that you never forget the first time Fox News calls you. I'm a registered Democrat, so it would be tantamount to a Jew eating pork on Yom Kippur to go on Fox. And and I, too, wasn't sure what to do, but, you know, I'm too far gone at this point. What I would say is this. I don't think it is the fault or the mess of the young generation, but it's certainly the young generation who are going to clean it up. And after October 7th, Israel began attacking our enemies by the air, by the sea, and the land. And you can't tell because I'm sitting, but I'm like 5 feet. The IDF does not want me. What I can do, and what I have been doing, and what we have been doing, is fighting in the battlefront of ideas, fighting in social media, fighting in the media, fighting in the halls of Congress, fighting in the halls of power, fighting in academia, fighting in the classroom. And every one of us, whether you're a young person or whether you are, I mean, I don't want to contrast with the people sitting in the room, not that you're not young. Sorry. You're all very young. But everyone in your own capacity with your own talents can and should and must contribute to that battlefront. And this is where I will get a little critical, and I'm not going to mention any organizations or names, but I have met with the whole gamut of the alphabet soup of Jewish nonprofits. And they have all told me how just sorry I am, but how brave and incredible I am. I don't need you to tell me how incredible I am because I call my mom every day and she reminds me. And I don't need you to tell me how sorry you are because, number one, I'm going through it, so I don't need sympathies. What I need you to do is tell me exactly what you're going to do with the collective billions of dollars that the Jewish nonprofit world raises every single year. Because we're at some pretty prestigious institutions, and we haven't really seen a lot of it. We've seen a lot of statements, we've seen a lot of calls to donors, but in terms of affecting practical change with young people, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So the best thing that needs to happen for us is to amplify our voices, and that's what we're doing tonight, and we really are incredibly grateful. But if you're on the board of a synagogue, if you're on the board of some dinner that's coming up, or you know a Jewish nonprofit, make sure that a Jewish student is speaking at that conference.
Great.
And make sure
Great.
that if you are going to talk about combating anti-Semitism, you recognize that the people who are fighting for the future of American Jewry, the people who are fighting for the preservation of the golden age of American Jewry, are the two people to my left. And you need to make sure that they are being heard and listened to more than anyone in the room.
Great.
You know, it was a very strange year to be an editor who runs a magazine that covers Jewish life. And it was a year that felt like I came face to face with, on a daily basis, with some of the darkest things that I ever had to cover in my career. At the same time, I got these three. At the same time, I saw what this moment was inspiring. And I also saw Bernard pick himself up and go. It was a year, I hate to say it, of incredible hope, in part because of the 4 people that are on the stage with me tonight. I would really love it if everybody would join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you so much. So before we close, I want to tell everybody that Bernard's book is going to be for sale in the lobby. We're not quite done yet. Wait 1 second. And he will be signing the book, which is an incredible treat. I am going to invite Bella, Yola, and Shabbos to come backstage with me, and Bernard is going to give everyone some closing remarks. So thank you all. Thanks for being here with me.
I don't know if remarks can close anything, but I would like to tell you that this moment for me is a blessing, is a great moment. I have spoken in the book so badly about our institutions, especially universities in France and in America, with so much sorrow. I know NYU. I was a teacher in NYU in 1980 to 1982. I made so many lectures in Columbia, and I was in Harvard a few years ago also. And when I heard, when I saw this blast of anti-Semitism, I really thought that something was lost forever in the American spirit, in the creed that makes America, and in the spirit of the Western world. When I listen to Yola, Bella, and it gives me hope again. And I thought when I listened to them that they really save the honor, that they are the revenge of America against the stupid, moronic, illiterate radicals that pretend to hold the stage in their 3 universities. Second, I believe that they don't only, when I listen to them and to their brilliancy, I thought that it is not only saving honor. I believe that tonight, really, and I mean it, if they want, if we want, and if we help them, tonight the counterattack starts in the campuses. And they can be really the swords of the vanguard, them and their comrades, because I know, I am accustomed, I have been a teacher, I know the universities, I know that they are not alone. I'm sure that there is at least a big silent minority who thinks as they do. Maybe they are not as brave as they are, but I'm sure there are who are as brave as them. So tonight, if they want, it is their decision, but it is also ours. The counter-attack starts in the campuses of the United States of America. And the last thing I want to say is that if they wish, I am at their side. And I'm ready to come, if they invite me, in Columbia, in Harvard, in NYU. And I wrote a book, Israel Alone. At the end of the day, what is it? It is a box of tools for them, for this sort of spirit. It is a book which is aimed at helping them and the others to argue, to fight, blow for blow. I'm ready to go at their side in order to explain and to prove and to demonstrate, for example, that to speak of apartheid about Israel is not only infamous, it is stupid. It is the proof of a moronic spirit. I'm able to demonstrate that. I'm able to demonstrate in a logical way, without propaganda, really mathematically, how the very word of colonial state about Israel is an insult to intelligence and to spirit. I don't speak about the settlements, of course. I speak about the very existence of Israel, qualified by some of their comrades in the campuses as a colonial fact. This is so silly. This is so absurd. And I know that story by heart. I reflected on that since 60 years. I'm ready to be at their side, if they want, to explain to their fellow students how Zionism, far from being a colonial ideology, has been at its birth and is still at that stage of its existence a tool against colonialism, a tool against imperialism. If we give to the words their sense, Israel today is a force against empire. If there is an empire of Hamas, there is in the same area an anti-imperial force, which is Israel, under one condition: recognize what is imperialism today. Imperialism is Iran trying to submit Iraq, other countries. If there is an empire, it is Russia having ambitions, Ukraine and the rest. If there is an imperialism, it is China, Tibet, and so on. If there is an imperialism, it is Mr. Erdogan with his dream of re-embodying and rebuilding the Ottoman Empire. So if this is true, if we are not late in our vision of the world, if we accept not to fight the ghost of an old dead empire, French empire, British Empire, American Empire. These, of course, I fought that. I was in the streets demonstrating against the war in Vietnam 60 years ago, 55 years ago, and I would do it again. But this is the old story. The real story today is the imperialism of Russia, of China, of the radical Sunni Islam, of neo-Ottoman Turkey, and so on. And Israel, far from being a colonial power, is the vanguard of the fight for many reasons which I will not develop here, but I'm ready to develop them in Columbia, Harvard, and NYU. I'm ready to go at their side also to demonstrate that, I hear the idea of the double standard, okay? Israel is not Palestinian Israel, there is a double standard. I'm ready to prove that if there is a double standard, it is not for the benefit, but it is at the expense of Israel. I am old, as they said, true. I was in Afghanistan, in Kabul, and in all Afghanistan, in November, December 2001. And then in the first part of the year 2002, when America, with reason, decided to eradicate Al-Qaeda after the horrible massacre of the September 11. I was there, special envoy of my president, President Chirac. And I saw how against the Taliban, against Al-Qaeda, there was a huge and great and beautiful coalition which helped finishing Al-Qaeda. I was there 20 years after, when ISIS tried to catch and to make a takeover on a big part of Iraq and Syria. A few years ago, Mosul and Raqqa. And I was in Mosul. I am probably one of the Westerners who saw with his own eyes in the most close way the liberation of Mosul. I was filming it. I made a film, which is available on all channels, YouTube and so on, which is called The Battle for Mosul. I filmed that. I saw, by the way, some terrible death of innocent civilians, which broke my heart, as the Palestinian civil casualties break my heart. But at that time, it broke the heart only of me. I never heard when the people of Mosul were bombed by French bombs, American bombs, and Iraq. I did not hear anyone shouting, crying, or screaming. But again, in Mosul, casualties, destructions, a jewel of humanity, the old Mosul, reduced to ashes by a strong coalition. Iraq, France, America, others, Emirates, and so on. This time, this is the real double standard. This is the real scandal. Israel is fighting the same war. It is the same war as we, American and his allies, fought in 2001 against Al-Qaeda. Same war which was fought in 2016 against ISIS. It is the same war. And this time, Israel is alone. Alone to wage the war. Alone to lead the war. And the allies of Israel, because of course Israel has some allies, only asks for compromise, ceasefire, stop the war, help the Hamas direction to save the face, and so on and so on. I never heard that when the question was Al-Qaeda in Kabul or ISIS in Mosul. This is a real double standard, which is a scandal. And this I'm ready to say it in Harvard, in New York University, and in Columbia. And if we do that, if in the most vibrant heart of this country, and of France, same for France, of course, but America is America, you know, the real battle is here, as always. If we do that, if we achieve to demonstrate that to the good-willing students, to those who don't really know and who desire to know, because there is not only we had today young, brave, intellectual heroes today on the stage, and there are on the other side some bastards manipulated by foreign countries. But in the middle, there is a lot of youngsters who don't really know and who are ready to be convinced. If we do that, we will change the game in America and in the rest of the free world. I listened yesterday the debate, okay? I'm not a listed Democrat because I'm not American. But you know, you guess, I don't want to enter into American politics, but you guess where my heart is. Nevertheless, there is one thing which struck me and which really filled me with a sort of sorrow. I heard the Democratic candidate. I listened to her very closely. She said one great thing about Ukraine, which is also very dear to my heart, because again, I'm a liberal, I'm a friend of human rights, I am a militant of anti-imperialism, so Ukraine is capital for me. About Ukraine, she was magnificent. She said, Ukraine has to win. We have the duty to give to Ukraine all the means, all the weapons necessary to win. This was great. Then discussion came on Israel. She was okay. She said that Israel will have always the support of America. You heard, you listened. But she said, Israel has the right to self-defense. Not the duty to win, but the duty to the right to self-defense. Why not the right to win? Why not the right to eradicate from this area of the world the representatives of the third fascism? After fascism, after Stalinism, radical Islam, who are such a threat for the world and for the Muslim world. If there is a war of civilization, if there is one, it is inside the Muslim world between the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and the moderate and enlightened Muslims. This is a real war. Why not give Israel the right, the means, and the duty as for Ukraine to win this war and to help the Muslim world to get rid of this plague? I believe that if our three young friends, if my three new friends do the job, if we help them do the job, if we help them plead the case, you will see. Next time, the now candidate, and I hope tomorrow president, will speak about Israel, she will say, there are two front lines in the war of the free world against tyranny, imperialism, and colonialism, Ukraine and Israel, and the two of them have to win. She will say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody for coming. Book signing in the lobby.